Ah, you look tantalizing. You know, I make fun of The View a lot, but that's only because they keep talking. Because COVID also taught Sunny Hostin how to get her groceries delivered.
3 years, that's when I discovered Instacart. And I give them a big tip because they don't always pay their people well. And so that's been an issue, I think, for the company. But man, you can get toiletries, you can get fire logs.
Fire logs? She had to tell the audience that she tips big because even she knows she sounds insane.
The term woke has been, in my view, co-opted by the right and weaponized and bastardized. So I was surprised to hear you use the term because historically, as you know, because I think you're quite brilliant, that woke is a word used by the Black community to note that we must be aware of social injustices.
But words
and
migrate.
So why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, and originally that was absolutely a great thing. Don't tell me that the left hasn't changed. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives who hated the...
Ever wondered what it's like to get verbally flattened on live TV while still clutching a smile like it's your only defense? Just ask Sunny Hostin, because when Greg Gutfeld and Bill Maher joined forces, it wasn't a debate, it was a demolition. Gutfeld unleashed sarcasm with the precision of a sniper on espresso, while Maher brought that smug, razor-sharp logic only a man who's deathly allergic to BS can deliver. Meanwhile, Sunny was left blinking like someone whose Wi-Fi crashed mid-TV talk. Her co-hosts, visibly cringing, and what sparked this delicious train wreck of a moment? Oh, it's messy. Gloriously, unapologetically messy.
People have to wonder, where does Sunny Hostin get her opinions?
Yeah.
Like you said, it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say on The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there. She's not very bright. So, but the problem with...
Any doubt that I was right about the change that's happened in the left? Watching people protest for a terrorist organization like Hamas? That straightened me up pretty quick.
You can see the way Sunny Hostin, the way she's touching her above her eye, and she can't even look at him because she's an activist, not a journalist or whatever it is that she...
Picture someone who wakes up each morning, stretches, sips their oat milk latte, and then transforms into the living, breathing fusion of a LinkedIn humblebrag and a Facebook mom group moderator on a power trip. That's Sunny Hostin. She's not just sharing opinions. She's hosting a full-on vintage buffet of unsolicited moral superiority, served on fine china with a silver spoon of self-importance. Every take is delivered like a TED talk no one asked for, seasoned with freshly Googled facts and topped off with a wink that says, "You're welcome for my brilliance." It's not just elitism, it's performance art with a standing ovation already cued.
The View. It's like, it's become like a medical hospital that displays human misfailure. Like, it's like here, let's look at this political oddity. Ah! You know, it's like, it really is like the left-wing equivalent of a carnival sideshow, except instead of bearded ladies and fat clowns and two-headed cows. Well, let me rephrase that. But The View is a victim of the sunk cost fallacy.
Enter Greg Gutfeld and Bill Maher, two men so ideologically opposed they could argue over the color of the sky. Yet here they are, arm in arm in the wild safari that is Sunny Hostin's logic. Gutfeld, Fox News' resident chaos gremlin, grins like a raccoon who just found a buffet in a back alley. Maher, HBO's seasoned curmudgeon, swings sarcasm like a battle axe, fueled by a steady diet of disillusionment and disdain. And somehow, in this surreal collision of worldviews, they find rare harmony, bonded by their mutual allergy to performative nonsense and the erosion of rational thought.
The truth, and when for years you've been telling lie after lie after lie, now you're carrying this big bag of rocks around you because it's too harmful for their ego to admit that we really were dishonest. And they could be honest. All they would have to say is, look, we hate Trump so much, we were willing to lie about Joe Biden because we felt he was preferable. We thought our lying and our cover-up was on your behalf. Just say that. You're still scum, but at least you're...
Sunny has turned the art of commentary into a kind of performance. Think bullet points borrowed from a sophomore thesis on systemic oppression, delivered with the theatrical flair of a PTA president running unopposed for vice principal. She doesn't debate. She proclaims with the zeal of someone utterly convinced that truth and emotion are interchangeable currencies. Ask her to explain inflation, and you won't get an economic breakdown. you'll get a passionate story about how oat milk lattes now cost $8 and how that somehow reflects deep-rooted injustice in the dairy-free yogurt aisle. Facts, only the emotionally validated ones make the cut.
I think that's bad. The View's co-host, Sunny Hostin, says, hold my beer, and is literally claiming Republican women can't think for themselves.
I think that women, white women in particular, want to protect the patriarchy here because it's to their benefit. They want to make sure that their husbands do well. They want to make sure that their sons do well. They want to make sure that their children do well. And they want to make sure that they do well. Most of the women in some of these studies are married white women, and they do fall in line with what their...
Gutfeld, naturally, had an absolute field day. He didn't even have to try. Watching Sunny attempt to intellectualize current events is like watching someone try to decode Shakespeare through a kaleidoscope. Colorful, confusing, and entirely off the mark. Every take is steeped in a fog of personal grievance, delivered with the confidence of someone who skimmed half a New York Times headline and called it a dissertation. Meanwhile, Greg, whose entire brand is Twitter troll, but with a production budget, simply leaned back, arched a knowing eyebrow, and let her contradictions unravel like a sweater caught on a nail. It was effortless chaos, and he knew it.
Hostin's obsession with race gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in sunny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe. Here's how she took the news. Roll it.
Wow.
And then there's Maher. You know it's dire when the guy known for yelling at clouds and side-eyeing society like it personally offended him ends up being the voice of reason. Maher didn't roast Sunny. He disassembled her arguments with the precision of someone angrily taking apart IKEA furniture just to prove a point. He lives for uncomfortable moments, and Sunny served one up like a steaming hot DoorDash order, overpriced, underwhelming, and arriving faster than anyone asked. At one point, without a trace of irony, Sunny implied that engaging in nuanced discussion was a form of privilege. That's right, she essentially claimed that layered thinking is now elitist. It's the rhetorical equivalent of declaring that rain is oppressive because not everyone owns an umbrella. A take so stunningly backward, it practically moonwalks. Maher and Gutfeld just stood there, visibly processing the moment, probably wondering how someone with a law degree could treat victimhood like a LinkedIn skill, endorsed by no one, yet somehow on full display. The thing about Sunny is, she doesn't actually want a dialogue. She wants a standing ovation. Every take is delivered like she's accepting an imaginary award for bravery in the face of mild disagreement. She's that student who raises her hand every 5 minutes in class, not to contribute anything helpful, but to remind everyone that yes, she did the reading, and yes, she has feelings about it. Revolutionary feelings, or so she believes. Gutfeld, who practically inhales mockery and exhales punchlines, didn't have to lift a finger. He let her grandstanding devour itself. Sunny is her own punchline. She could say good morning and somehow turn it into a TED talk on how capitalism exploited coffee farmers. Her tone, equal parts Whole Foods, Manifesto, and NPR bedtime story, told on a reclaimed wood record player, of course.
Here's a treat for you. The insufferable Sunny Hostin getting a beatdown from Bill Maher on Gaza.
We're all concerned about the innocent civilians that have been collectively punished and murdered, large children and women. And are you at all concerned about the fact that the International Criminal Court just today issued a subpoena for Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, that's ridiculous, but it's a war.
Why?
Because it's a war, and they were attacked, and they're defending themselves. Now, this is a war. Do you think Hamas needs to be destroyed? This is the question.
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
So how can we do that with a ceasefire?
All right. So Hamas needs to be destroyed because they are a terrorist organization who say openly that they want to commit genocide on the Jewish.
What makes the whole spectacle even more fascinating is that Sunny genuinely sees herself as the voice of reason, like the calm center in a storm of chaos. In her mind, her takes aren't just opinions. They're the intellectual scaffolding of American discourse. Meanwhile, Gutfeld and Maher are over here playing rhetorical whack-a-mole with her contradictions and the mallet, labeled basic common sense. Maher's response, in particular, was almost poetic. He's that guy at the bar who orders one bourbon and suddenly launches into a monologue about the collapse of Western civilization. So watching him reduce Sunny's lofty declarations into philosophical confetti felt less like a debate and more like performance art. At one point, she confidently claimed that certain demographics couldn't possibly understand systemic issues unless they had personally experienced them. Maher, without missing a beat, reminded her that reality doesn't come with a prerequisite in personal trauma. Because if truth requires lived experience, what happens when someone else's experience contradicts yours? According to Sunny, they're either misinformed or unknowingly serving the patriarchy. She talks like experience is the only valid currency. Unless your receipts don't match her narrative, then you're just wrong. The only thing more flexible than her logic is a yoga instructor on Adderall. She somersaults from dramatic claim to dramatic claim, hoping no one notices the intellectual wreckage in her wake. Meanwhile, Gutfeld doesn't bother with stats. He wields tone like a scalpel. Sarcasm is his superpower, and Sunny practically gift-wrapped the material for him. Watching her spiral into rhetorical confusion while being verbally juggled by a man whose journalistic style is 50% dad joke, 50% libertarian side-eye was cinematic. She lobbed a self-righteous gotcha, and Greg responded with the casual disinterest of someone being asked if they wanted fries with that virtue signal.
Bill Maher did get to go on The View, and he said some things that offended the small minds over there. So he had a bit of a debate with the intellectual titan, Sunny Hostin. She was upset with him for using the word woke, and Bill Maher took her.
But the most painfully entertaining part, she never even realizes it's happening. Sunny is being roasted in real time, and she's too wrapped in her own narrative to feel the heat. It's like watching someone repeatedly walk into a glass door, then blame the building for being discriminatory. She tosses out half-baked arguments dressed up as intellectual souffles and seems genuinely baffled when they collapse like a bad sublet in a rainstorm. Bill Maher's final jab wasn't just sharp, it bordered on existential. He asked, with that signature dry wit, how someone can claim to be open-minded while simultaneously trying to cancel anyone who veers even slightly off script. Sunny's response? Absolute silence. Because apparently, the Wi-Fi signal of reason doesn't quite reach whatever philosophical bunker she's broadcasting from. And the tragedy, if you can call it that, in this comedy of misplaced convictions, is that Sunny could have been brilliant. She's got the credentials: lawyer, journalist, commentator. The resume screams should know better. But instead of anchoring her arguments in knowledge, she defaulted to identity. Every topic becomes a pulpit. Every disagreement, oppression. Every question, a threat. It's activism by aesthetic, less about change, more about being loudly outraged in designer heels. Solutions aren't the goal, emotional high ground is. And Maher and Gutfeld, they don't even need to collaborate. They're like rival assassins who accidentally show up to the same target, nod silently, and let their weapons do the talking. Watching them converge on Sunny's unraveling soapbox was a rare bipartisan roast, a moment of unexpected unity, bonded not by politics, but by a shared bewilderment at her inability to distinguish between being challenged and being persecuted. Sunny Hostin delivers her declarations with the unshakable confidence of someone who's never been corrected in a group chat. She believes so deeply in the sound of her own voice, it functions like a force field, repelling logic, nuance, and self-awareness alike. And while she crusades valiantly against every perceived microaggression, Maher and Gutfeld just sip their metaphorical tea, quietly marveling at how someone can speak so passionately and say so very little.
I make fun of The View a lot, but that's only because they keep talking. Those hens are always clucking. They get to say stupid stuff for an hour every day, and then I get to say stupid stuff for an hour every day, except on purpose. But every now and then, one of those dingbats inadvertently says something that reveals modern liberal thought so perfectly, it deserves further study. You know, like a weird serpent that washed up on the beach and you want to...
Let's talk about that voice, that tone. It's not just what she says, it's the way she says it. Imagine the sound of a Prius honking in passive-aggressive protest, soft, but somehow deeply judgmental. Her cadence rises like a slow-building symphony of condescension, as if each statement was cleared in advance by a smugness advisory board. She doesn't simply disagree. she descends from the mountaintop of moral certainty with the gravity of a Supreme Court ruling, making every correction feel like a national security breach. Gutfeld's brilliance is in his restraint. He doesn't tangle with her point by point. He just jabs at the loose threads and lets the contradictions do the unraveling. It's chaos's strategy: poke, prod, and step aside while the self-importance implodes. Honestly, it's not difficult when your opponent keeps stepping on every metaphorical rake in the ideological front yard. Then there's Maher, the seasoned cynic, older, wearier, but sharper for it. He doesn't roast Sunny for laughs. He roasts her because someone has to. He's the guy at the back of the theater muttering, "The emperor has no clothes," while she's still on stage fashioning a new wardrobe from recycled outrage and secondhand indignation. And we haven't even touched on her favorite role, America's unsolicited moral compass. Every conversation turns into a TED talk no one signed up for. Every opposing idea is treated not as a different perspective, but as a dangerous heresy. She doesn't engage in dialogue. She declares moral exile. Logic, to her, is a velvet rope nightclub, and she's the bouncer, turning away anything that shows up in flat shoes and common sense.
All of them, actually, that montage we showed, their absurdity strengthens the Republicans at this point. Because Republicans are like, oh yeah, you've been saying that about us. And I think ever since I got into politics in 1995, as I recall, Democrats have been saying this about Republican women. So they just never change. It's not, talk about not fresh. They got nothing else. And so they don't want to defend their policies. So what they try to do is to make the other team more toxic.
She calls for empathy, but never seems to extend it. She demands understanding, yet offers none in return. Tolerance, in her world, is a one-way street, and the street sign bears her name in bold. The only thing truly consistent in her rhetoric is the steady hum of double standards, strumming like the world's smallest violin playing in the key of self-righteousness. Greg Gutfeld didn't even need to strategize. He could have been reading cue cards from the crowd. Every one of Sunny's talking points came gift-wrapped with a giant, blinking neon "Kick Me" sign. She cited systemic injustice, and Gutfeld dryly asked how that squared with her six-figure salary. She proclaimed herself the voice of the unheard, and yet somehow managed to drown out everyone else. Maher and Gutfeld weren't there to destroy her. They were trying to rescue the conversation from the flaming wreckage of her logic before it swallowed the whole panel. But, as usual, Sunny didn't notice. She stood firm, arms crossed in rhetorical defiance, scanning the room for applause that never came. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: people don't clap for someone who confuses loudness with leadership or who mistakes unwavering certainty for actual correctness. And in that silence, her contradictions echoed louder than any speech ever could.
Virtue signals on the toilet. But that's not the point here. While everybody else was trying to figure out how to survive as the government told us that breathing in public could kill us, Sunny was lolling around in her big house clicking on pictures of arugula while mixing Cocoa Puffs.
The most ironic twist: Sunny genuinely believes she won that exchange. She walked off the set like a caped crusader, utterly convinced she had just defended truth, justice, and whatever hashtag was trending on Twitter that morning. Meanwhile, Gutfeld exited with that trademark smirk, and Maher probably celebrated by lighting a cigar with one of her discarded cue cards. In the long, storied history of daytime TV disasters, this segment belongs right between Dr. Oz runs for Senate and Kanye gives marriage advice. A slow-motion car crash of ego, echo chambers, and applause that felt more like a reflex than agreement. And with that, Sunny Hostin added another page to her ever-growing anthology of accidental comedy. Not because she's trying to be funny, quite the opposite, but because nothing tickles the irony bone like watching someone deliver incoherent indignation with the gravity of a courtroom philosopher. There's something almost theatrical about it. Sunny doesn't just join discussions, she performs them. It's a one-woman Broadway show of righteous grievance. Every sentence feels like a final verdict. Every side-eye, a summons. She's not sharing thoughts, she's issuing rulings wrapped in a tone so sharp and coiled it could floss the Statue of Liberty. Even the simplest conversation becomes a crusade. She doesn't argue with people, she battles invisible oppressors only she seems to see. And the audience, they're just along for the ride, popcorn in hand. While Maher casually unravels her arguments like he's tugging at a loose thread on a thrift store sweater, Sunny stands resolute inside a rhetorical house of straw, mistaking fragility for flexibility. She delivers her points with unwavering certainty, unaware that the foundation is buckling beneath the weight of buzzwords and borrowed outrage. Gutfeld doesn't even bother trying to outwit her. He simply holds up a mirror and watches as she trips over her own reflection. It's not so much a debate as it is a dramatic soliloquy crashing headfirst into a cannonball of sarcasm. This isn't ideological warfare, it's rhetorical slapstick. Picture an intellectual seesaw. Sunny's side is overloaded with hashtagged indignation and recycled think piece lingo, while the opposite end floats serenely, sipping irony through a compostable paper straw. She believes she's dominating the discussion, completely unaware that the scoreboard was unplugged sometime around her second monologue. And the audience